My parents broke into my cabin with 20 relatives to celebrate July 4th. I only found out when my mom called panicking after they had set the place on fire. But before the smoke and the shouting, there was just the silence of the road. I spent 11 years making myself invisible. If you saw me at a truck stop in Wyoming or a diner in Nebraska, you would not look twice. I was just another guy in a faded jacket, drinking black coffee and staring at a phone screen. That was the point. I was the ghost in my own family, the disappointment who drove a truck while my sisters lived the lives my parents had designed for them. They saw a man with no ambition. They did not see the bank account on my phone screen that read $197,000. My name is Hugo. I am 30 years old, single, and for the last decade, I have lived on microwave burritos and truck stop showers. I wore the same 3 pairs of jeans until the denim turned white at the knees. I took the routes nobody else wanted because they paid an extra 10 cents a mile. I drove through blizzards in the Dakotas and heat waves in Arizona, hoarding every extra dime like a dragon sitting on a pile of gold. I did the math once. Between my older sister Caroline and my younger sister Diana, my parents dropped about $180,000 on education, weddings, cars, and bailouts. Caroline got her MBA funded fully by mom and dad. Her wedding cost $40,000 and included a photographer who charged more per hour than I made in a 2-day haul. Diana got her down payment on a starter home handed to her like it was pocket change. For my 25th birthday, I got a $50 gift card to Applebee's and a card that said, "We are proud of you." They were not proud. I was the backup plan. I was the free labor they called when they needed a couch moved or a garage cleaned out. I was never invited to the gala dinners or the important anniversaries, just the days that required heavy lifting. So I saved. Every single paycheck, 45% went straight into an account they did not know existed. I watched them treat me like the help while I built a fortress of cash they could not touch. I wanted something that was mine. Not a gift, not a loan, and definitely not a handout with strings attached. I found it in Montana last November. It was 20 acres outside of Whitefish, an old timber frame cabin from 1978. It needed work. The deck boards were rotting and the appliances were from the Reagan administration, but the bones were solid. Hand-cut timber beams. A stone foundation that looked like it grew out of the earth. A creek running through the back that sounded like music. The owner was a widow. She was selling because her husband had died 2 years prior and she could not maintain the land anymore. She was asking $195,000. I stood on the porch, feeling the cold mountain air in my lungs, and I knew this was it. This was the finish line of the marathon I had been running for 11 years. I offered her $185,000 in cash. I can still see the look on her face. She thought I was messing with her. "Nobody pays cash anymore," she said. I pulled out my phone and showed her the bank statement. She started crying. She told me I reminded her of her husband. Hardworking. Practical. Someone who knew the value of building something yourself. We closed on December 18th. I wired the money from my phone while sitting in a Pilot parking lot at 2 in the morning, eating a lukewarm burrito. My account went from nearly $200,000 down to $12,000 in a single heartbeat. It was the most terrifying and exhilarating moment of my life. I drove straight there for my last delivery of the year. I arrived at the cabin around midnight in a snowstorm. I walked through my own front door with nothing but a duffel bag and a case of energy drinks. I did not have furniture. I did not have a bed. I slept on the floor in my sleeping bag, shivering until the wood stove finally caught. When I woke up, the sun was cutting through the pine trees, lighting up the dust motes dancing in the air. I looked out at my own 20 acres and realized for the first time in my life, there was nobody to tell me what to do. No dispatch. No parents. No sisters looking down their noses at me. I told exactly 2 people, Ray my buddy from the road who helped me find the real estate listing, and Tommy, my dispatcher, so he knew where to send my tax forms. I spent the next 7 months fixing the place up between halls. I replaced the roof. I fixed the plumbing. I spent weekends sanding the floors until my hands were raw. The plan was simple. I was going to tell my family at Christmas. I wanted to bring mom and dad up, just the two of them, and show them what the disappointment son had built without a single cent of their help. I wanted to see the look on their faces when they realized I did not need them. That plan died on July 9th. I was 3 hours outside of Bozeman, hauling a load of construction equipment when my phone rang. My mom's name popped up on the dashboard. I answered it because she usually only calls midweek if someone has died. "Hugo," she said. Her voice was high and tight, vibrating with that specific panic she gets when she has lost control of a situation. "Hugo, we need you right now." I gripped the steering wheel. "What happened?" "There was a fire at your cabin," she said. My brain stopped processing words. I stared at the yellow line on the road. "What are you doing at my cabin?" The silence on the other end of the line was loud. Then she said the words that changed everything. "Your cabin, honey. Caroline found the address in your mail. We thought it was so sweet that you bought a family vacation spot and did not tell us, so we planned a big reunion." She paused, waiting for me to absorb the blow. "We did not break in," she added quickly. "Dad called a locksmith." I felt the blood drain from my face. My hands started to shake. I was doing 80 miles per hour in a 65 zone and I did not even care. "We have been here since Thursday," she continued, oblivious to the rage building in my chest. "Today Uncle Paul was grilling and the propane tank had a leak. It flared up. It caught the deck. We tried to put it out, but the kitchen has smoke damage and the window blew out and Hugo, you need to come here and fix this." I hung up. I pulled the truck onto the shoulder, gravel crunching under the tires. I sat there for a long time, listening to the engine idle, looking at the photo of the cabin I kept taped to my dashboard. The sanctuary I had built in silence. The one thing that was mine. They had found it. They had broken in. And now they were burning it down. I put the truck in gear and merged back onto the highway. I was not going there to fix it. I was going to war. The diesel engine roared beneath me, a low, guttural vibration that usually soothed my nerves, but today it felt like the ticking of a bomb. I was barreling down Interstate 90, pushing the rig harder than I ever had. The speedometer needle hovered near 80, way past the legal limit for a vehicle of this weight. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles had turned the color of old bone. Every time I blinked, I saw the image of my cabin. Not the way I left it, with the pristine snow on the roof and the silence of the woods, but the way my mother had described it: smoke, fire, chaos. I needed to make a call. I tapped the voice command on the dashboard. "Call Tommy." The line rang 3 times before my dispatcher picked up. Tommy was an ex-military guy who ran his logistics board like a tactical operation. He never wasted words. "Go for Tommy." I took a breath, trying to steady my voice. "I need emergency time off. I am dropping the load at the yard in Missoula, and then I am gone." There was a pause. Tommy knew me. In 5 years, I had never missed a shift. I had never been late. I had driven through flu fevers and ice storms without a complaint. "Is everything all right?" he asked. His tone shifted from boss to friend. "No." I stared at the asphalt rushing under my wheels. "My family broke into my cabin. They set it on fire." The silence on the other end stretched for 5 long seconds. "Say that again." "They found the address. They hired a locksmith to drill the locks. They have been partying there for 3 days, and they had an accident with a propane tank." Jesus. Tommy let out a low whistle. "Are you okay to drive? You sound like you are about to put that truck through a guardrail." "I am fine. I just need you to reroute the load." "Consider it done. I will have Mike pick up the trailer in Missoula. Take whatever time you need, Hugo, and listen to me. Yeah, get a lawyer. Do not just talk to them. Document everything. If they broke in, That is criminal. Treat it like a crime scene. I hung up and focused on the white lines blurring past. Tommy was right. This was not a family dispute. This was a crime scene. For the next 4 hours, my brain replayed my mother's voice on a loop. It was not just the fire that made my stomach churn. It was the casual entitlement. The way she had said, "your cabin," as if it were a shared asset she had simply forgotten to mention. I thought about the locksmith. That was the detail that stuck in my throat like a shard of glass. They had arrived at my property, seen the locked gate and the dead-bolted door, and they did not turn around. They did not call me to ask for a key. They called a professional to break in. They paid money to violate my privacy. My father, Arthur, was a man who cared deeply about appearances. He would never jaywalk because someone might see him breaking a rule. But breaking into his son's home, apparently, that was different. Because in his mind, I did not really own anything. Anything I had was an extension of them. I had to pull over twice to calm down. The first time, I dry heaved on the side of the highway, my body rejecting the stress. The second time, I sat in a rest area parking lot and just breathed, staring at the screen of my phone. I looked at the photos I had taken in December. The clean, empty rooms. The freshly stained deck. The peace. I reminded myself what I was fighting for. It took me 4 hours to make it to Whitefish. The sun was starting to dip behind the mountains, casting long, purple shadows across the valley. I turned off the main highway onto the gravel access road that led to my property. My stomach dropped. I could smell it before I saw it. The sharp, acrid scent of wet charcoal and burnt plastic. It overpowered the smell of pine needles and damp earth. I rounded the final bend and hit the brakes. My truck skidded slightly on the loose gravel before coming to a halt. I counted 7 vehicles parked in my front yard. My mother's silver SUV was parked right on the grass I had spent weeks reseeding. My father's truck was next to it. Caroline's sedan, Diana's SUV, Uncle Paul's massive recreational vehicle, Aunt Nadine's van, and a beat-up car belonging to a cousin I had not seen in a decade. It looked like a tailgate party at a football game. Someone had set up 3 large tents in the clearing between the trees. There were coolers scattered everywhere. Red plastic cups littered the ground like fallen apples. A portable Bluetooth speaker was blasting classic rock, the bass thumping against the side of the valley. And then I saw the cabin. The deck I had rebuilt by hand, plank by plank, was a blackened skeleton. The railing on the left side was gone, eaten away by flames. The siding of the house was scorched with thick, black streaks reaching up toward the roofline. The kitchen window, the one I had framed with cedar trim, was blown out. Jagged shards of glass glinted in the grass. Foam from a fire extinguisher covered the charred wood like dirty snow. I sat in the cab of my truck, the engine idling, watching them. They had not seen me yet. They were moving around the property as if they lived there. Uncle Paul was holding a beer, laughing at something my father said. Kids were running around with sparklers, throwing them into the dry brush near the tree line. A banner was strung between 2 pine trees. It was painted on a bedsheet in bright blue letters: Hovel Family Reunion 2024. The rage that had been boiling in my chest for 4 hours suddenly went cold. It settled into something heavy and hard in the pit of my stomach. This was not a mistake. This was an invasion. I killed the engine. The silence of the truck shutting down was sudden and jarring. I opened the door and stepped down onto the gravel. The sound of my heavy work boots hitting the ground made a few heads turn. The music seemed to stutter and stop. One by one, the faces turned toward me. The laughter died. The sparklers fizzled out. My mother was the first to move. She rushed over from the patio area, her face flushed, her eyes red and puffy. She was wearing a white apron that was smeared with soot. "Hugo!" she shouted, throwing her arms out as if she expected a hug. "Hugo, honey, oh, thank God you are here." She stopped about 5 feet away from me when she saw the look on my face. She faltered, her hands dropping to her sides. "We are so sorry," she said, the words tumbling out fast. We were going to surprise you. But then, the accident happened, and we are all so upset, and we have been trying to clean up. But it is just a mess. I looked at her. I looked at the blackened ruin of my deck. I looked at the trash covering my land. Get the hell off my property. She blinked, recoiling as if I had slapped her. What? I kept my voice low, but it carried across the yard. Everyone, off my property. Now, my father walked over, a drink in his hand. He put on his reasonable voice, the one he used when he was trying to explain why he could not come to my high school graduation because he had a golf tournament. Son, let us talk about this, he said, stepping between me and my mother. It was an accident. We will help pay for the repairs. We were just trying to do something nice. You broke into my house, Arthur. His face went red. He hated being called by his first name. We did not break in, he snapped. We had a locksmith open it. And you should have told us you bought this place. It is the perfect family spot, and we thought you wanted us all to enjoy it together. He gestured to the crowd of relatives behind him, who were watching us with wide eyes. You paid a locksmith to drill my lock like it was your place, I said, scanning the faces of the people who had ignored me for 30 years. Nobody asked permission. You just decided you had the right. I stepped past him. I did not want to hear his excuses. I needed to see the damage inside. I walked toward the open front door of the cabin, my boots crunching on the broken glass from the window. Caroline stepped out onto the porch, blocking my way. She was holding a glass of wine, ice clinking against the sides. She looked at me with the same bored expression she had worn since we were teenagers. Hugo, calm down, she said, rolling her eyes. We are family. What is the big deal? It is just a little smoke damage. Insurance will cover it. I stopped at the bottom of the stairs. I looked up at her, standing on the scorched remains of the deck I had built with my own money. She took a sip of her wine and smirked. Honestly, she said, we were doing you a favor by breaking the place in. You should be thanking us. Thanking you. The words hung in the air between us, heavy with an arrogance so profound it was almost impressive. Caroline swirled her wine, waiting for me to concede, to apologize for ruining her vacation. I did not trust myself to speak. If I opened my mouth, I was going to scream, and I knew that if I started screaming, I might never stop. I stepped around her, my shoulder brushing against hers hard enough to make her stumble, and walked through the open front door of my home. The smell hit me first. It was not just the smoke. It was the stale, sour scent of spilled beer and too many bodies in a small space. It smelled like a fraternity house after a long weekend, not the silent, pine-scented sanctuary I had left 7 days ago. I stood in the entryway and looked at the kitchen. My stomach turned over. The cabinets I had sanded down and painted by hand were unrecognizable. The creamy white finish was streaked with soot and scorched black near the stove. 2 of the doors hung crookedly from their hinges, warped by the heat. The window above the sink, the one I had framed perfectly to catch the morning light, was gone. The glass was blown out, leaving a jagged, toothy maw that let in the flies and the heat. Yellow fire extinguisher foam covered everything. It dripped from the countertops and pooled on the floor, mixing with the ash and the broken glass. I walked further in, my boots sticking to the floor. The refrigerator door was hanging wide open. The light inside was dark. A sour smell drifted out from the spoiling food. I followed the power cord and saw it lying on the floor. They had unplugged my refrigerator. I looked around, confused, until I saw the orange extension cord running from the outlet out the back door. They had unplugged my appliances to power their portable cooler on the deck. They had let my food rot so they could keep their beer cold. I walked into the living room. Someone had rearranged my furniture. My leather recliner, the first piece of new furniture I had ever bought for myself, was pushed against the wall. A wet, muddy towel was draped over the headrest, leaving a dark water stain on the leather. The coffee table was covered in empty soda cans and a half-eaten bag of chips. But the rug was the worst. It was a woven wool rug I had bought in Missoula for $300. It was the most expensive thing in the room. Now, it was tracked with muddy boot prints, red wine stains, and something that looked like barbecue sauce. I felt like I was walking through a crime scene where the victim was my own dignity. I moved down the hall to the bedrooms. The door to the guest room was open. Piles of suitcases exploded across the floor. But the door to the master bedroom, my room, was ajar. I pushed it open. Two kids I did not recognize, distant cousins maybe, were jumping on my bed. They were wearing shoes. There were toys scattered across the floor. A juice box had been squeezed onto my nightstand. The purple liquid dripping down the side of the wood and pooling on the floorboards. My duffel bag, the one I kept my personal gear in, had been moved to the closet. They had unpacked their own clothes into my dresser. Get out. The words came out as a whisper, but the kids froze. They looked at me with wide, terrified eyes. Get out of my room! I roared. They scrambled off the bed and ran past me, crying. I stood there for a moment, looking at the shoe prints on my quilt. I felt a profound sense of violation. This was the one place in the world where I was supposed to be safe, where I was supposed to be in control. And they had taken it. I turned around and marched back through the house, past the ruined kitchen, and out onto the deck. The entire family had gathered in a defensive cluster near the barbecue grill. The kids were clinging to Aunt Nadine's legs. My mother was wiping her eyes with a tissue. My father was pacing back and forth, his face a mask of purple fury. Diana was typing furiously on her phone, not even looking up. They looked at me like I was the villain. Like I was the intruder. Everyone needs to leave right now, I said. My voice was steady, but my hands were shaking at my sides. Pack your trash. Pack your tents. And get off my land. Diana looked up from her screen and laughed. It was a sharp, fake sound. You are not calling the cops on your own family, Hugo, she said. Just relax. We will clean everything up tomorrow and chip in for repairs, and it will be fine. You are overreacting like you always do. You broke into my house, I said, staring at her. You destroyed my property. And you still have the nerve to tell me I am overreacting. Uncle Paul stepped forward. He was a big man, used to being the loudest voice in the room. Now listen here, Hugo, he boomed. Your mother told us you bought a cabin, and we thought it would be nice to all get together. We did not know you would be so possessive about it. We are family. Family shares. Did anyone ask me? I asked. Silence fell over the group. The wind rustled through the pine trees, sounding like a hush. Did a single one of you call me and ask if you could come here? More silence. My mother started crying harder, a soft, keening sound that usually made me cave. Not today. Caroline set her wine glass down on the railing of the burned deck. Look, she said, her tone sharp and annoyed. We are sorry about the fire, okay? But you are being incredibly rude right now. We drove all the way out here to celebrate, and you are treating us like criminals. This is exactly why nobody invites you to things. You are always so negative. Because you are criminals, I said. I pulled out my phone. I did not look at them anymore. I looked at the screen. I opened the camera app and started recording. I panned across the burned deck. I walked over to the window and filmed the broken glass. I filmed the pile of trash bags by the trees. I zoomed in on the portable grill that had started the fire. Hugo, what are you doing? My mom asked, her voice trembling with a new kind of panic. I am documenting the scene, I said. I walked back toward the group, holding the phone up so it captured all of their faces. My father red-faced and angry. Caroline looking indignant. Diana looking bored. Uncle Paul looking confused. Then I lowered the phone and opened the dialer. My thumb hovered over the numbers 911. I am giving you one last chance, I said, leave. Now. Or I make the call. Diana rolled her eyes. You will not do it. You do not have the guts. I pressed the call button and put the phone to my ear. The line rang once. 911, what is your emergency? The operator asked. I looked my sister dead in the eye. My name is Hugo Havel. I am at 1240 Two Pine Ridge Road. I have a group of trespassers on my property who have refused to leave, and I need to report an act of arson. The wait for the sheriff was the longest 20 minutes of my life. The sun finally slipped behind the mountains, plunging the valley into a gray twilight. The only light came from the glow of my family's headlights and the dying embers of the charcoal grill. Nobody spoke. My mother sat on a cooler, sobbing into her hands. My father stood with his arms crossed, staring at the tree line, refusing to look at me. Diana and Caroline whispered furiously to each other near the cars, casting venomous glances in my direction. I leaned against the grill of my truck, arms crossed, watching them. I did not feel triumph. I felt a cold, hollow numbness. It was the feeling of cutting off a limb to save the body. Then, the blue lights washed over the trees. The cruiser crunched up the gravel driveway, the red and blue strobes bouncing off the pine needles and the charred siding of my cabin. A second vehicle followed, a fire marshal's truck. The deputy who stepped out was a man named Dobrinsky. He looked to be in his mid-40s, with the tired eyes of a man who had seen too many domestic disputes go wrong. He adjusted his belt and walked toward me, his boots heavy on the gravel. "You Hugo Havel?" he asked. "Yes, sir," I said. "I own this property." He looked past me at the group huddled by the tents. "Is that the family?" "Unfortunately," I said. He almost smiled, a quick twitch of his lip, before his face went neutral again. "All right, let us start with the basics." He pulled out a notepad. I gave him the rundown. "I bought the place in December. I never told them. They found the address by going through my mail. They arrived 3 days ago. They are refusing to leave." Dobrinsky nodded, writing everything down. "And the damage?" I pointed to the deck. "Arson," I said. "Negligence with a propane tank. They also broke a window and destroyed the interior." He looked at the blackened wood, then back at me. "Okay. Stay here. I need to get their side." I watched him walk over to my parents. My father straightened up, putting on his best law-abiding citizen face. I could not hear the words, but I saw the body language. My father pointing at the cabin, making sweeping gestures of explanation. My mother wiping her eyes, looking frail and sympathetic. Caroline stepping in to argue. Dobrinsky just listened, occasionally writing something down. He did not look impressed. He looked bored. After about 15 minutes, he walked back to me. The fire marshal was already inspecting the deck, taking photos with a flash that popped like lightning in the dark. Dobrinsky flipped his notebook shut. "Here is the situation, Mr. Havel. They are claiming this is a misunderstanding. They say they thought they had implied permission because they are family. They did not have permission," I said. "I know," Dobrinsky said, "and here is the kicker. Your father admitted they hired a locksmith. He actually showed me the receipt on his phone to prove they did not break a window to get in. He thought that made it better." I let out a short, bitter laugh. "He paid a professional to break into my house." "Exactly," Dobrinsky said. "That changes things. That moves this from a civil dispute about trespassing into criminal territory. Breaking and entering." He looked me in the eye, his expression serious. "So, it is your call, Hugo. Some of this is civil property damage, and you will have to sue them for that. But the trespassing and the breaking and entering, those are criminal charges. If you want me to, I can formally trespass them and file the report for charges. But you have to be sure. This is your family. Once I put this in the system, you cannot just take it back because your mom cries at Christmas." I looked over at them. They were watching us, waiting to see if the prodigal son would finally fold. They expected me to cave. They expected me to eat the cost, fix the mess, and apologize for making a scene. That is what I had done for 30 years. I thought about the $180,000 spent on my sisters. I thought about the $50 gift card. I looked at the charred remains of the deck I had built with my own hands. "Do it," I said. Dobrinsky held my gaze for a long second. "You are sure?" "I have never been more sure of anything." "File the charges. Get them off my land." "All right." he said. He turned and walked back to the group. I saw the moment he delivered the news. My father's face went from purple to a pale, sickly white. My mother let out a wail that echoed off the valley walls. Caroline lunged forward as if she were going to grab the deputy's arm, but her husband pulled her back. Debrinsky pointed to the cars. He was not asking any more. He was ordering. For the next hour, I stood by my truck and watched the dismantling of the Havel family reunion. It was chaotic and angry. They threw coolers into trunks. They collapsed tents into messy piles. My mother tried to approach me once. "Hugo, please," she sobbed. "You cannot do this to your father. It will ruin his reputation." I did not look at her. I looked at the deputy. Debrinsky stepped in front of her. "Mom, get in the vehicle." "Now," she retreated, weeping. My father refused to look at me at all. He looked defeated, a small, old man who had suddenly realized his authority meant nothing here. But Caroline made sure I heard her. As she walked to her car, she stopped 10 feet away. "You are dead to us," she hissed. "Do not expect to be welcome at Christmas. Do not expect us to ever help you again. You are a selfish, bitter little man, and I hope you rot in this cabin alone." I did not say a word. I just watched her get in her car and slam the door. One by one, the engines started. One by one, they rolled down the driveway, taillights fading into the darkness. Debrinsky stayed until the last car was gone. He walked over to me, handing me a card. "Come by the station tomorrow morning," he said. "You will need to sign the formal statements. I will have the fire marshal's report attached to the file." "Thanks, deputy." He nodded, touched the brim of his hat, and got into his cruiser. When the blue lights finally disappeared, the silence that rushed back into the valley was heavy. It was not the peaceful silence I had found in December. It was a bruised, heavy silence. The air smelled of wet ash and exhaust fumes. I walked up the steps to the burned deck. I touched the charred wood of the railing. It was cold and rough under my hand. I was alone. My family hated me. My sanctuary was destroyed. I pulled out my phone and dialed the one person I knew would understand the mechanics of a disaster. Ray picked up on the second ring. "Hugo. What is going on?" I took a deep breath, inhaling the smoke of my own life burning down. "Ray," I said, "I need a lawyer. A shark. I am going to sue them for everything they have." Ray came through. He sent me a number for a man named Frank. He told me Frank was not the kind of lawyer you hired to mediate a dispute. He was the kind you hired when you wanted to salt the earth so nothing would ever grow there again. I met him on a Monday morning in an office building in Kalispell that smelled of expensive leather and old money. Frank was 60 years old, wearing a suit that cost more than my first car. He had eyes like a lizard, cold and unblinking. He did not offer me coffee. He just held out his hand for the file. I sat in silence for 20 minutes while he read. I watched him flip through the photos of the burned deck. I watched him study the police report. I saw his eyes pause on the locksmith's receipt my father had foolishly provided to the deputy. Finally, Frank closed the folder. He took off his reading glasses and looked at me. "This is not a lawsuit," he said, his voice dry as dust. "This is an execution. Can we win?" I asked. Frank actually smiled. It was a terrifying expression. "Mr. Havel, they admitted to a police officer that they hired a third party to bypass your locks. They are on record admitting they did not have your permission. The fire marshal's report confirms negligence. They do not have a defense. They have a confession." He pulled out a legal pad and started writing numbers. "We are going to file for everything," Frank said. "Property damage, loss of use, emotional distress, legal fees. And because they broke in, we are going to push for punitive damages." He turned the pad around. The number at the bottom was $45,400. "Are you ready for this?" Frank asked. "They are going to try to hurt you. When people realize they are wrong and they are going to lose money, they get nasty." "I am ready," I said. "Good," Frank said. "Let us burn their world down." The lawsuit hit them on Wednesday. By Thursday morning, the war had moved from the legal system to the internet. I was back on the road, hauling a load of timber to Idaho, when my phone started vibrating. I ignored the calls. Mom, Dad, Caroline, they called in shifts. When I did not answer, the notifications started popping up. I made the mistake of checking Facebook at a rest stop outside of Coeur d'Alene. Diana had been busy. She had posted a selfie of herself crying, mascara running down her cheeks. The caption was a 5-paragraph essay about toxic family members who value money over blood. She did not use my name, but she did not have to. She talked about a brother who had abandoned his family and was trying to bankrupt his parents over a simple accident. The comments were a cesspool. People who had known me since high school were calling me a narcissist. They were sending her prayers and heart emojis. Then I saw what my mother was doing. Ray's wife went to the same church as my parents. She sent me a screenshot of the church's prayer chain email. My mother had asked the congregation to pray for her wayward son, whose heart had been hardened by greed. She painted herself as the martyr, the loving mother trying to save her child from his own selfishness. But Caroline, as always, went the furthest. I found a link on her profile to a crowdfunding campaign. The title was, "Help a Family Recover from a False Lawsuit." She was asking for $10,000. The description claimed that a vindictive relative was suing them after inviting them to his home. She claimed I had changed my mind after the accident just to get an insurance payout. It was a complete fabrication. It was fraud. I sat in the sleeper cab of my truck, the blue light of the phone illuminating the dark, and I felt a heat rising in my chest that made it hard to breathe. I wanted to reply. I wanted to post the police report. I wanted to upload the video of them laughing while my house was trashed. I wanted to scream the truth until they drowned in it. I typed out a comment on Diana's post. My thumb hovered over the send button. Then my phone buzzed with a text from Frank. "Do not engage," the text read. "I see the posts. Every lie they tell is evidence of harassment. Every dollar they raise fraudulently is another charge we can add. Let them talk. Silence is your weapon." I deleted the comment. I turned off the phone. I stared out the windshield at the dark highway. Frank was right. Responding was what the old Hugo would have done. The Hugo who wanted to be understood. The Hugo who wanted them to love him. That Hugo was dead. The man sitting in this truck was a business entity, and business entities do not get into Facebook arguments. I called Tommy instead. "Hey boss," I said. "I need more miles." "You just left yesterday," Tommy said. "I know. But I need to stay moving. If I sit still, I am going to drive back there and do something stupid." "I got you," Tommy said. "I have a run from Seattle to Boston. It is a long haul. Good pay. It will keep you on the road for a week." "Send it," I said. For the next month, that truck was my monastery. I drove until my eyes burned. I listened to the hum of the tires and the static of the radio. I watched the country roll by, vast and indifferent to my problems. While I worked, they unraveled. Frank sent me updates. The crowdfunding page had been taken down for violating the terms of service. Someone had reported it as misleading. Caroline was blaming me, claiming I had hacked her account. My father had gone to his veterans hall to complain about me, looking for sympathy. But when the guys asked him why he did not just ask for a key, he did not have an answer. He stopped going to the hall. They were flailing. They were lashing out at a ghost. They could not reach me. They could not manipulate me. For the first time in 30 years, their guilt trips had nowhere to land. September came, bringing with it the first chill of autumn and the summons for depositions. Frank called me while I was inspecting my brakes in a parking lot in Wyoming. "It is time," he said. "They have hired a lawyer. A kid named Miles who looks like he just passed the bar exam yesterday. We are scheduling the depositions for next week. You need to come home, Hugo." I wiped the grease from my hands onto a rag. "Are they going to be there?" I asked. "Yes," Frank said. "They have to be." "Good," I said. "I am ready to look them in the eye." The conference room in Frank's office was sterile. It smelled of lemon polish and stale coffee. The walls were lined with leather, bound books that nobody ever read, intended only to intimidate anyone who sat at the long mahogany table. I sat at one end, next to Frank. My hands were folded on the table, still stained with grease from the brake job I had done in Wyoming. Opposite me sat the people who shared my DNA. My father, Arthur, looked 10 years older than he had on the burn deck. His suit, usually crisp and authoritative, hung loosely on his shoulders. He refused to make eye contact with me, staring instead at a smudge on the polished wood. My mother, Eleanor, was vibrating with anxiety, twisting a tissue into a tight white rope in her lap. Caroline sat between them, her jaw set in a line of defiance, though I could see the tremor in her hands when she reached for her water glass. Next to them was their lawyer, Miles. He was young, barely older than me, with a haircut that cost more than my weekly food budget and a suit that looked like it had been tailored for a magazine shoot. He had the eager, predatory energy of someone who thought he could talk his way out of gravity. A court reporter sat at the head of the table, her fingers poised over her stenotype machine, ready to turn our family trauma into a permanent transcript. "This is a deposition in the matter of Haval versus Havel," Miles said for the record. He looked at me with a practiced smile that did not reach his eyes. "Mr. Havel, let us start with your relationship with the defendants. Would you characterize your family dynamic as close?" "No," I said. "And why is that?" Miles asked, leaning back. "Because they treat me like an employee, not a son." Miles nodded as if he had expected this answer. He shuffled some papers. "We have statements here indicating that you have harbored resentment toward your sisters for years. Is it true that you were jealous of the financial support your parents provided for their education and weddings?" Frank shifted in his seat but did not object. He wanted them to show their hand. "I was not jealous," I said, keeping my voice flat. "I was observant." Miles picked up a piece of paper. "You have mentioned to mutual acquaintances that you received a $50 gift card for your 25th birthday, while your sisters received significantly more. Do you feel that your parents owe you money, Mr. Havel?" "No." "Then isn't this lawsuit just a way to extract the money you feel you were denied in the past?" Miles smiled, thinking he had trapped me. "Isn't this about punishing them for favoring your sisters?" I looked at him. Then I looked at my parents. My mother was watching me with wide, fearful eyes. She knew the truth. She knew exactly how little they had given me. "This lawsuit is about the fact that they broke into my house and burned it down," I said. "If a stranger had done it, we would not be talking about my birthday. We would be talking about prison time." Miles stopped smiling. He tried to pivot. "You admit you never told them about the cabin. Why hide it if you did not want to create conflict?" "Because I knew they would do exactly what they did," I said. "I knew they would feel entitled to it. So you admit you created a situation where a misunderstanding was likely to occur." "I created a situation where I owned a home. They created a felony." Frank touched my arm gently. That was enough. I had held the line. Miles had tried to paint me as a bitter, money-hungry son, and I had given him nothing but cold, hard logic. Then it was their turn. Frank did not yell. He did not pound the table. He was a surgeon. He operated with a quiet, terrifying precision. He started with my mother. "Mrs. Havel," Frank said, looking at her over the rim of his reading glasses. "How did you acquire the address for Hugo's property?" My mother swallowed hard. I was helping Hugo clean his old apartment. I saw a piece of mail." "Did Hugo ask you to look through his mail?" "No," she whispered. "Did he ask you to clean his apartment?" "Well, no, but mother's help," she said, her voice trembling. "So you entered his residence without permission, went through his private documents without permission, and copied down an address he had not given you. Is that correct?" "It sounds worse when you say it like that," she said, tears starting to form. "It sounds like a violation of privacy because it is," Frank said. He turned a page in his notepad. "Now, let us discuss the arrival at the cabin. When you arrived and found the gate locked, did you call Hugo?" My mother looked at my father. "No, we wanted to surprise him." Frank looked at Arthur. Mr. Havel, let us talk about the locksmith. Who called him? My father cleared his throat. I did. And what did you tell him? I told him I was the owner and I had lost my keys. The silence in the room was deafening. The court reporter's keys clacked softly, recording the lie. Frank looked up. You lied to a tradesman to gain access to a property you did not own. That is fraud, Mr. Havel. Did you know that? Arthur's face went a deep, blotchy red. I am his father. I paid for his diapers. I did not think I needed a permission slip to see my son. You needed a deed, Frank said, and you did not have one. Arthur slumped in his chair. The bluster was gone. The moral high ground he had stood on for 30 years had just crumbled under the weight of the law. Then Frank turned his attention to Caroline. She sat up straighter, smoothing her skirt. She looked ready to fight. She had her MBA. She was used to boardrooms. She thought she could outsmart a small, town lawyer. She was wrong. Ms. Havel, Frank said, you organized this trip, correct? I suggested a family gathering. Yes, Caroline said, her voice clipped. And when you saw the condition of the cabin after the fire, did you offer to pay for the damages immediately? We said we would handle it, Caroline said. But Hugo started screaming and acting irrational. Frank picked up a piece of paper. I have a transcript of a voicemail you left for your brother 3 days after the fire. Would you like me to read it? Caroline paled. I was upset. Frank read it anyway. You called him, and I quote, a selfish parasite who should be grateful we even visited his dump of a cabin. Caroline said nothing. She stared at the table, her knuckles white. You also started a crowdfunding campaign, Frank continued. You claimed Hugo had invited you. That was a lie, wasn't it? I was trying to protect the family reputation. She snapped. By committing wire fraud? Frank asked. Caroline's mouth opened and closed. She looked at Miles for help, but the young lawyer was staring at his notes, realizing he was captain of a sinking ship. Frank leaned forward. Let us be clear. You conspired to enter the property. You lied to gain access. Your party caused $45,000 in damages, and when caught, you attempted to destroy your brother's reputation to cover your own crimes. This is not a family dispute, Ms. Havel. This is a conspiracy. The word hung in the air. Conspiracy. It carried the weight of prison sentences. It carried the weight of ruined careers. Caroline looked at me then. For the first time, I saw real fear in her eyes. Not annoyance, not condescension. Fear. She realized that I was not her little brother anymore. I was the plaintiff. And I held the sword. Frank finished with them by noon. The deposition ended not with a bang, but with the quiet shuffle of papers. My family stood up, looking exhausted and small. They did not look at me. They filed out of the room like ghosts. When the door clicked shut, Frank took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. Well, he said. That went well. Did we get them? I asked. Frank looked at me. Hugo. They just admitted to fraud, trespassing, and negligence on the record. Miles knows it. He is going to call me before the end of the day. To do what? To beg, Frank said. They cannot go to trial. If a jury hears what I just heard, they will not just award you damages. They will destroy them. Miles has to settle. He has no choice. I looked at the empty chairs where my parents had sat. I felt a strange cocktail of emotions. Relief, yes, but also a deep, aching sadness. It was the final nail in the coffin of my childhood. I had forced them to admit the truth. But the truth was that they had never respected me. They had only tolerated me as long as I was useful. Frank packed his briefcase. Go back to the road, Hugo. I will handle the rest. By the time you get back from your next run, this will be over. I walked out of the office and into the bright, cold Montana afternoon. The sun was shining, but I felt cold. I got into my truck and started the engine. The rumble of the diesel was the only thing that made sense. I drove west, toward the mountains. I did not look back. Frank was right. 2 days later, while I was sitting in a diner in Spokane, my phone rang. They want to settle, Frank said. I put down my fork. What is the offer? Full damages, Frank said. $45,000 for the repairs, $7,000 for legal fees. $52,000 total. I looked out the window at the gray sky. It was exactly what I had asked for. It was justice. Take it, I said. There is one more thing, Frank said. I drafted the terms of the settlement. I included a clause they have to sign. A permanent restraining order. 500 feet. No contact. If they violate it, they go to jail immediately. No warnings. I closed my eyes. I thought about Diana's fake tears. I thought about my father's lie to the locksmith. I thought about the silence of my cabin before they violated it. Do it, I said. Make them sign it. Consider it done, Frank said. Congratulations, Hugo. You won. I hung up the phone. I looked at the coffee in my mug. I had won. I had my money. I had my property. And I had lost the only family I ever had. I signaled the waitress for the check. I had a load to deliver in Seattle. And after that, I had a cabin to rebuild. The wire transfer hit my account on a Wednesday morning in November. I was hauling a load of agricultural machinery through the flat, gray expanse of Nebraska when my phone buzzed on the dashboard. I pulled over at the next exit, parking the rig in a gravel lot surrounded by cornfields that had been harvested down to stubble. I picked up the phone. I opened my banking app. There it was. $52,000. It was a sterile, digital number on a screen, but it carried the weight of a sledgehammer. That money was not just a settlement. It was my parents' retirement fund. It was the equity in their home. It was the cruise they had planned for their 35th anniversary. It was my sister's safety net. I stared at the balance for a long time. For 30 years, money had flowed in one direction in the Havel family. It went to Caroline's tuition. It went to Diana's weddings. It went to the appearances my father was so desperate to maintain. I had been the dam that held back nothing, the dry creek bed that never saw a drop of rain. Now, the river had reversed course. I did not feel joy. I did not feel like punching the air or shouting. I felt a grim, heavy satisfaction, like setting a broken bone. It hurt, but it was the only way to heal correctly. I called Frank. It is done, I said. Good, Frank replied. His voice was raspy, like he had been smoking cigars all morning. The funds cleared. The signed agreement is on my desk, and the judge signed the protection order an hour ago. I looked out at the Nebraska sky. Tell me the terms again. 3 years, Frank said. Arthur, Eleanor, and Caroline are prohibited from contacting you by phone, email, or third party. They are prohibited from coming within 500 feet of your person, your vehicle, or your property. If they show up at your cabin, you call the sheriff, and they go to jail. No warnings, no civil debates, handcuffs. And Diana? I asked. Diana was not named in the suit as an organizer, Frank said. So technically she is not on the order. But given the financial blast radius of this settlement, I doubt she has the gas money to come visit. Thanks, Frank. Don't thank me, Hugo. You paid for it. I hung up and merged back onto the highway. The engine hummed a little smoother. The load felt a little lighter. I had cut the anchor chain. I was finally drifting free. I took December off. I had the cash now, and I had a mission. I drove back to Montana, parking my truck at the edge of the property because the snow was already drifting 2 feet deep against the tree line. The cabin looked wounded, but still standing. The blackened scar on the side of the house was ugly against the pristine white snow, but I had a plan. And more importantly, I had a budget. The repairs started the next day. I hired a local contractor named Pete to help me with the heavy lifting. Pete was a man of few words, which made him my favorite person on earth. He drove a battered pickup truck and knew how to frame a deck that could survive a nuclear winter. We worked through the cold, our breath pluming in the air like exhaust. We tore down the charred remains of the deck. We stripped the smoke-damaged siding. We gutted the kitchen down to the studs. Every time I swung the sledgehammer, I felt like I was exorcising a ghost. I smashed the cabinets my mother had opened without asking. I tore out the floorboards where my cousins had tracked mud. I ripped out the drywall that had absorbed the smoke of their negligence. We rebuilt it better. That was the goal. Not just to fix it, but to upgrade it. To make it something they could never have afforded, even if they hadn't wasted their money on appearances. I bought commercial-grade appliances. A 6-burner gas range that cost more than my first car. A refrigerator big enough to hold a month's worth of food. I put in granite countertops, cold and hard and impossible to burn. I installed a dishwasher, a luxury I had never had in my life. I paid for it all with the settlement money. Every time I swiped my card, I thought about my father explaining to his country club friends why he could not renew his membership this year. By Christmas, the cabin was watertight and warm. But I was not done. I spent $3,000 on a security system that would make the Pentagon jealous. I installed 8 cameras covering every angle of the property. I put motion sensors on the driveway that would alert my phone if a squirrel crossed the gravel. I installed smart locks that logged every entry and exit. I was building a fortress. Pete helped me mount the cameras on the eaves. He paused while drilling a bracket into the new cedar siding. "You expecting an invasion?" he asked, looking at the array of lenses. "I already had one," I said. "Never again." Pete nodded. He did not ask for details. He just drilled the hole. On New Year's Eve, Ray drove up from Missoula. He brought a bottle of whiskey and 2 thick steaks. We sat on the new deck, which I had expanded to wrap around the side of the house. The composite decking was gray and smooth, fire-resistant and weatherproof. We watched the sun go down over the mountains, the sky turning a bruised purple. "I heard about your folks," Ray said quietly. I took a sip of whiskey. The liquid burned pleasantly in my chest. "What did you hear?" Ray hesitated. He knew the history. He knew the cost. "My wife saw your mom at the grocery store," Ray said. "She looks rough, Hugo. Older. She told my wife that they had to refinance their house. Apparently, the settlement wiped out their savings, and with the interest rates the way they are, their monthly payment doubled." I stared at the tree line. "Good," Ray continued. "Your dad is picking up side work. Consulting, he calls it. But really he is just trying to scrape together cash. They had to cancel that cruise they have been talking about for 5 years." I felt a twinge of something in my gut. It might have been guilt, once upon a time. Now, it just felt like balance. "And Caroline?" I asked. Ray let out a short, dark laugh. "Her husband walked. He left her. About a week after the settlement check cleared. Apparently, he did not know she had orchestrated the break-in until the lawsuit hit. He was furious that their joint savings took a hit to pay for her legal defense. He moved out. She was back with your parents." I almost choked on my drink. "Caroline, living with mom and dad, in her old room," Ray said. "At 34 years old, I heard she is miserable. She is blaming everyone but herself. Says you ruined her life." I looked at the camera mounted above the back door. The little red light blinked steadily in the twilight. "I did not ruin her life," I said. "I just stopped subsidizing her delusion." Ray clinked his glass against mine. "To owning your own peace," he said. "To peace," I replied. The winter deepened. The snow piled up against the windows, insulating the cabin from the world. I spent my days finishing the interior trim. I learned how to cut crown molding. I built a custom bookshelf for the living room. I filled the space with things that were mine. I was alone, but I was not lonely. For the first time in my life, the silence wasn't empty. It was full of possibility. I realized that for 30 years, I had been carrying a backpack full of rocks. I had been carrying my parents' expectations, my sister's failures, and the family's shame. I had walked uphill, begging them to acknowledge how heavy the load was, begging them to help me carry it. The lawsuit was not about the money. It was about taking off the backpack. I set it down, and I walked away. By March, the snow began to melt. The creek in the backyard swelled with runoff, rushing loud and fast over the stones. The air smelled of wet earth and pine sap. The cabin was finished. It was perfect. The floors gleamed. The stainless steel appliances shone in the kitchen light. The security monitors in my office showed a perimeter that was secure and empty. I had spent almost every dime of the settlement. The $52,000 was gone, transformed into wood and stone and glass. My parents' nest egg had become my sanctuary. I picked up extra rotes in April. I wanted to replenish my savings, and honestly, I missed the road. I missed the rhythm of the highway. But this time, when I drove away from the cabin, I did not feel like I was escaping. I felt like I was leaving something valuable behind, something that would be waiting for me when I returned. I was staining the new deck on a Tuesday afternoon when the motion sensor on my phone chirped. I froze. I pulled the phone out of my pocket. Camera 1, at the bottom of the driveway, showed a white sport utility vehicle turning in. It was driving slowly, hesitantly. I recognized the car immediately. It was not my parents. It was not Caroline. They were legally barred from being here. It was Diana. I watched the screen as she navigated the ruts in the gravel. She was alone. No kids, no husband. I set down my staining brush. I wiped my hands on a rag. I walked to the front of the cabin and stood at the top of the stairs, waiting. She parked next to my truck. She sat in the car for a long minute before opening the door. When she stepped out, she looked like a ghost of the sister I remembered. Her perfect hair was pulled back in a messy bun. She was wearing sweatpants. Her face was pale and drawn. She looked up at me. I stood on the high ground, looking down. "Hugo," she called out. Her voice cracked. "Can we talk?" I did not move. I did not invite her up. "You are trespassing, Diana." She took a step forward, her hands held up in surrender. "Please," she said. "I drove 3 hours. I just need 5 minutes." I looked at the security camera mounted above my head. I knew it was recording. I knew Frank would want me to tell her to leave immediately. But curiosity is a dangerous thing. I wanted to know why she had come. I wanted to know what could possibly drive her to face the brother she had mocked on the internet. "You have 5 minutes," I said. "Stay by the car." She slumped against the side of her vehicle, looking defeated. "I need help, Hugo," she said. I waited. "Mom and Dad are broke," she said, the words rushing out. "They can't help with the childcare anymore. They cut me off. Caroline is draining them dry just to pay for her divorce lawyer." "And?" I asked. "And we are drowning," she whispered. "The medical bills for the second baby are crushing us. We are 3 months behind on the mortgage. My husband he is talking about leaving too. He says if we lose the house, he is done." She looked up at me, tears streaming down her face. Real tears this time, not the performance she put on for Facebook. "I need $20,000, she said. "Just a loan. I will pay you back, I swear. Please, Hugo, you have the money now. You won." I looked at her. I looked at the sister who had received $35,000 for a wedding while I ate truck stop food. I looked at the sister who had watched me be treated like a servant for decades and never said a word in my defense. She thought the money I had won was a lottery jackpot. She did not understand that it was blood money. I walked down the steps slowly. I stopped 10 feet away from her. "You want a loan?" I asked. "Yes," she sobbed. "Please. For your niece and nephew. Don't let them lose their home." I thought about the night of the fire. I thought about the kids jumping on my bed with their shoes on. I thought about the juice stains on my nightstand. "You should have thought about that before you invaded my property," I said. "That wasn't my fault," she cried. "I just came along." "I didn't organize it." "You knew," I said. My voice was low and hard. "You all knew, and none of you asked permission. You just assumed you could take whatever you wanted from me because that is how it has always been." "I am your sister!" she screamed. "No," I said. "You are a stranger who shares my last name." I pulled out my phone. I brought up the dialer. "You have 30 seconds to get in your car," I said. "Hugo, please!" 25 seconds. She stared at me, her mouth open in shock. She realized, finally, that the bank was closed. That the brother she knew, the doormat, was gone. 15 seconds, I said. "Or I call the sheriff." She scrambled into the car. She slammed the door. She peeled out of the driveway, gravel spraying everywhere, her tires spinning in the dirt. I watched her go. I watched the dust settle. I felt nothing. No guilt. No regret. I walked back up the stairs to finish staining my deck. The brush moved back and forth across the cedar planks, a steady, hypnotic rhythm that smoothed out the jagged edges of the last hour. I watched the stain soak into the grain, turning the pale wood a deep, rich amber. It smelled of chemicals and progress. Down at the end of the driveway, the automatic gate began to close. I heard the electric motor hum, a low mechanical whine that sounded like safety. The heavy iron bars swung shut, locking with a solid clank that echoed off the pine trees. My sister was gone. The dust from her tires had settled back onto the gravel. The silence of the mountain returned, heavier and sweeter than before. I dipped the brush again. The wood needed 3 coats. It had to be done right. You could not rush the foundation, and you could not rush the finish. That was a lesson it had taken me 30 years to learn, but I had finally mastered it. Pete pulled up an hour later. His truck rattled over the washboard gravel. The bed loaded down with lumber for the shed expansion we were starting. He parked next to my rig and stepped out, adjusting his baseball cap against the afternoon sun. He looked at the fresh ruts in the driveway, deep gouges where Diana had spun her tires in her haste to escape. He looked up at me on the deck. "Someone leave in a hurry?" he asked, grabbing his tool belt from the passenger seat. "My sister," I said. "She stopped by for a visit." Pete raised an eyebrow. He knew the story. He had seen the police reports when we were filing for permits. He knew about the restraining orders. "She did not stay long," he noted. "I gave her 30 seconds," I said. "She used 15. Pete nodded slowly. He did not offer pity. He did not tell me family was complicated. He just kicked a loose stone with the toe of his boot. "Good," he said. "Some people need to learn consequences exist." He walked to the back of his truck and unlatched the tailgate. "Grab that end of the 4x4, he said. "We have daylight burning." We worked until the sun began to dip behind the peaks of the Whitefish Range. We framed out the new shed, measuring twice and cutting once. There was an easy camaraderie between us, the kind that exists between men who respect the work more than the words. We did not talk about feelings. We talked about load, bearing walls, and joist hangers. It was the most honest conversation I had had in years. When the light finally failed, we packed up the tools. Pete cracked open 2 sodas from his cooler and handed one to me. We sat on the tailgate of his truck, our boots dangling over the bumper, watching the sky turn from blue to a bruised purple. The air was getting cold, the kind of sharp, clean cold that wakes you up. The creek was running high with snow melt, a constant rushing sound that washed away the silence. "This is a good place," Pete said, taking a long drink. "Yeah," I said, "it is." "Worth protecting," he added. I looked out over my 20 acres. I looked at the dark line of the trees, the silver ribbon of the creek, and the solid, unmoving shadow of the gate at the end of the driveway. I thought about the $180,000 my parents had spent on my sisters. I thought about the microwave burritos and the truck stop showers. I thought about the nights I had spent sleeping on the floor of this cabin, freezing because I did not have a bed yet. It was all worth it. Every mile. Every lonely shift. Every dollar saved. Because this view did not belong to the bank. It did not belong to my parents. It did not belong to the ghost of the son they wanted me to be. It was mine. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, half expecting another desperate text from a blocked number, another attempt by the past to break into the present. But it was Tommy. "Got a premium route for you next week if you want it," the text read. "Portland to Boston. Excellent pay." I smiled. The road was calling. It always would. But now, the road was not an escape. It was just a job. It was the thing I did to pay for the life I actually wanted. I typed back. "I am in. Send the details." I slipped the phone back into my pocket. I finished my soda and set the can down on the tailgate. I walked back up to the cabin as the first stars appeared. I slept that night better than I had in years. There were no nightmares about fire. There was no anxiety about the future. There was just the sound of the wind in the pines and the settling of the new timber. Life was good. I had my peace. I had my property. And I had the deep, quiet satisfaction of knowing I had won. That was enough.